Hello, welcome to another webinar of Bringing It Home. This is a great moment for us also to go into a journey to our sitting at the feet of elders. And since the last one was around books, and since we're talking a lot about our amazing Sharon that usually is one of the hosts, but in this one was one of the guests. As a check-in, while you're checking in and joining this call, please, you can put in the chat your name and one of your favorite books, for example, as I just did now. And as we are entering here today, we have Sharon and Reggie, who will be bringing us home once again. And I would like to pass to Sharon while you're also putting some of your favorite books in the chat to kick us in with a practice.
Thank you so much. So welcome everybody. And now I'm back to my regular role, which is really fun, although the other was fun too. So let's begin just after you write in whatever with a short practice period to help us more completely gather fully. You can sit comfortably, close your eyes or not. We'll start by listening to sound, whether it's the sounds of my voice or other sounds. It is a way of relaxing deep inside, allowing our experience to come and go. And while, of course, we like certain sounds and we don't like others, we don't have to chase after them to hold on or push away. So unless that sound is something you need to respond to, just let it wash through you. And bring your attention to the feeling of your body sitting, whatever sensations you discover. See if you can feel the earth supporting you. See if you can feel space touching you, which we don't do by picking up a finger and poking it in the air. We receive the sense of space, which is already touching us. Bring your attention to the feeling of your breath, just the normal, natural breath. And the operative word is rest. We're going to rest our attention. You don't have to make the breath deeper or different. Simply feel it as it is. In my early meditation practice, I saw that I was so hyper vigilant. It was like I'd never taken a breath before. I had so much performance anxiety. I'm not going to do it right. I used to say to myself, you're breathing anyway. All you need to do is feel it. It's just one breath. It's happening anyway. All you need to do is feel it. And if your attention wanders, you get lost in thought, or you fall asleep, truly, it's okay. See if you can recognize that, gently let go, and simply return to the feeling of the breath. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze, and we'll end the meditation. So thank you for that. I always appreciate just a sense of gathering. Everyone, no doubt, expended some energy to get here, physical energy, emotional energy, and now here we are. And but are we? And so just doing a brief period like that really helps gather and more fully arrive. So what I wanted to open with today was really, it actually was born from a comment Reggie made some time ago, which was there's a difference between older age and eldership. And in terms of eldership, there was I'm appreciating your book suggestions, by the way, selections. There's a certain sense of forging ahead, being one of the first people, or at least the first people you know of, to seek something out, to explore something. And it reminded me of how very often in my bio these days, which I don't personally write, other people write it, it says, it describes me as a meditation pioneer, which is kind of funny to me, but at the same time, when people say to me, how long have you been meditating? And I say 50 years, which is true, shockingly true. Yeah, it is true. I think, oh yeah, I guess. And people say that was before it was cool. That was before like everyone was doing it. I say, yeah, it was something I felt compelled to do. So I was in college, as many of you know, and I went to college when I was 16 years old. So when I was a sophomore in college, I was 17, and I took an Asian philosophy course, which, as far as I can tell, looking back, I took because it was on a good day for my schedule. And the course totally changed my life. It was in the context of that course. I heard, first of all, the Buddha's teaching about suffering in life, how it's inevitable, it's part of the fabric in life. And instead of that being a depressing comment, for me, it was liberating because I, like many people, had a very chaotic, traumatic childhood. And like for many people, my family system was not one where you could ever talk about these things. And so I didn't know what to do with all of those feelings inside of me. And for me to hear there's suffering in life translated in my mind to, you're not so weird. You're not so different. You belong. Everyone belongs. It's not that there's only suffering in life, but, at least here in this country at that time, and I would say probably now as well, there's a kind of pile on, we suffer and we're ashamed of it and we want to hide it, or others are suffering and we think, let's just put them away where we don't have to see it. It's not easy just to say, yeah, there's suffering in life. So that was a big deal. And then I heard in the context of that class that there were tools, there were methods, there were actual techniques called meditation. And if you practice them, you could be a whole lot happier. So I was going to college in this city in New York State called Buffalo. I looked around Buffalo, I did not see it anywhere. So I did this crazy thing. I created an independent study project for the university and said, I want to go to India and learn how to meditate. I want to study meditation. And they said, yes. So off I went, and I look back at that moment and I think, what was I thinking? I was like that point 17, just about to turn 18. I was 18 when I left. I'd never even been to California before. I, grew up on the East Coast in New York, and it was like, wow. And just before I went, which is kind of the heart of this story, the town of Buffalo was visited by this Tibetan Lama named Trungpa Rinpoche. And I don't know how he ended up there it was his first tour to North America. And he gave a talk and he asked for questions. So I was there and he asked for written questions. So I wrote out a question and I said, I'm about to leave for India. It was like maybe 3 or 4 days before I was going to leave. I had no idea where I was going to go. I said, I'm about to leave for India to learn how to meditate. Do you have any suggestions on where I should go? And he had this big pile of questions in front of him. And he reached in, he pulled out my question. He read it out loud. And he was silent for a moment. And then he said, I think you had perhaps best follow the pretense of accident. Like no addresses, no handy monastery guidebook. I think you had perhaps best follow the pretense of accident. And I left. And that's exactly how it happened. I went to this place and that place and didn't work, or translator was like the other end of India, or, all kinds of things just weren't happening. I went to an international yoga conference, which was a disaster, the low point of which was when the yogis and swamis were pushing and shoving against each other to be the first to grab the mic and speak. And I thought, I will never, ever find a teacher and learn how to meditate. And lo and behold, a young graduate student in psychology named Dan Goleman was giving a paper at that conference. And he mentioned he was on his way to an intensive 10-day meditation retreat in another town, which was really like the straight stuff, like how to. And I thought, that's it. And it was it. And what I had through all those ups and downs and trying and trial and error was just coming close to my intention, remembering I really want to learn this. This is all I have. I didn't know where the path was going to take me. And that was kind of replicated when we started the center, the Insight Meditation Society. Someone else suggested we do it. It sounded like a good idea. We had no money. We couldn't get a mortgage. People went to the bank and personally took out loans. Someone's dad gave them a car, so we had a car. Our mantra the whole first year was we can always close in a year. Can always close in a year. And people commend us and say, you must have had such courage. You must have had such vision. And I say, no, we did like one thing at a time. We had some intention. We tried to stay close to it, to do good in this way, made plenty of mistakes and just kind of went along. And so I just wanted to tell that part in contrast to our friend, John Kabat-Zinn, who many of you know is the founder of mindfulness-based stress reduction, which has been so impactful in the world. And John tells the story. He was actually sitting here on retreat when he had the thought, you could take this whole body of knowledge outside of the spiritual realm, bring it into science, use that language to describe it. First, you bring it to healthcare, then you bring it to education, And he said he got like a 20-year plan in his head. He got up, he wrote it down, and then he did it, including the name, mindfulness-based stress reduction. So sometimes we've been on panels together, like laughing, because I'm like, I don't know, you just do the next thing, and you step into the unknown. I had no model, I had no person sort of saying, yeah, first go to India, then you do this, then you do that. And we didn't know how to establish a retreat center. I don't think we even knew what a mortgage was exactly, and but there was something compelling us, and we just did it. And every year I was saying before we actually started, every year I say, I've got to be more like John, and my friends tell me that every day practically. You've got to be more strategic. You've got to plan it all out. You can't just go into the unknown in that way. And I never ever change. So I guess it's part of me. And then I wanted to bring in Reggie to this conversation, and ask him about his world, because I know he's an elder and not very old, and stepping into the unknown and new territory in those ways, and then turn it over to all of you to sort of talk about how you proceed into the unknown yourselves. So Reggie.
Yeah, Sharon, thank you for the story, and thank you for the just hey, thank you for allowing us to put you on the spot at the beginning of the month. Like, I hope you had as much fun as we did. Like, giving, like, being with Mirabai and you was a great experience. And one of the things that I believe fervently is you don't have to be old to be an elder. Like the whole concept of eldership to me implies stewardship and just sharing your story. And I've done that. So I mean, I'll give a present example. So like through the Kripalu Institute of Yoga and Health, in a month, I'm holding the first ever retreat for men of color, and never been done in Kripalu, right? Like in these times, like in the United States, it's just a really hard time to be of color in the United States. Like they're shooting us quite literally. And this idea that I had for this retreat was before all this, like before Tyree Nichol was killed, before all these things. I just had this idea, and I was talking with a friend of mine. I was like, this should happen, right? And we were like just ambling along. Then all these tectonic events started to happen, and I was like, oh. So that kind of musing that I had several months ago is now an imperative. And I'll say that I mean, there's no real guidebook for what we're doing because it's never been done before. Part of the challenge that we've been having is convincing people that they are worth rest. Like rest is worth their time. Like you don't have to grind and go. Like you can take it easy and like come with us, and we'll show you how to take it a little easier. So to me, like that is only possible because I've fumbled through my practice for the past 10 years, right? Like, most of you know this, I did not practice meditation or yoga for enlightenment. I did it because I was in a psychologically abusive job situation, and I was this close to calling my former boss the 13-letter password. For those of you who don't know what that is, it starts with mother and rhymes with trucker, right? And so like I was this close to being very unenlightened, and like for whatever reason I stopped because we were in a staff meeting and she looked me dead in my face, clearly pre-COVID, because she was all in my stuff. Just like, we don't know why we hired you. You're a waste of headcount. Why did you move across the country? And my base instinct was ready to be like there, but for whatever reason, I stopped. And then I went to a yoga studio and basically had like $100 in my pocket, and they were like, we have a 30-day for $30 special. And I took out 100. I was like, take all this. I'm going to be here an awful lot. And that raw moment over time has brought this thing called active peace, right? So like when we talk about eldership or stewardship, like this teaching practice, which has all these gongs and art and all this other stuff, began because I was this close to cursing out my boss because she was psychologically abusive and ugly to me. So when I tell the story about it, people are like, oh my goodness, like you're like avant-garde, all these other things. I'm like, I'm really just trying to make sense of this thing called life and like try and surrender to the present moment and be a servant to alleviating stress in the world, right? Like, so like that's my plan. But when I tell the story or the stories that they go along with it, that's eldership, right? People are like, oh, we thought you had some grand beginning. I was like, nah, I was this close to like spitting all the curse words in the 3 languages that I speak to my boss and figured that'd be a career limiting move, right? Because she was going to get it in, well, actually 4, like African American English, English, Spanish, and Portuguese. She was about to get it. But I stopped. And like that pause, which I didn't know what it was at first, is the sacred pause that we teach in yoga and mindfulness, right? Like, so that sacred pause, which came to me in a moment of extreme distress and anger. It's now a beautiful story, but it just happened like that, right? And so it's a blessing that it happened. But y'all, like, I didn't plan on being a teacher at all. We were joking in pre-production. My teaching practice started during the pandemic because 2 weeks before the world shut down in March 2020, I was at a retreat and one of my yoga teachers, Rod Stryker, in front of 250 people was like, some of you need to teach more and study less, Reggie. And I was like, that ain't no some of you. Why, like, so basically I was like, it's kind of messed up. Like, how you gonna put me on a spot in front of 300 people? This totally sucks. So again, not the most enlightened response. But I listened because I was just like, maybe he received something that I need to listen to, and I'm kind of hard-headed, so sure. And then 2 weeks after, when the pandemic hit and I responded super calm with a heart of service, I was like, oh, that's what they saw. Got it. So again, in the context of eldership, when we tell our stories, it makes the insurmountable seem approachable. Right. So when I'm like, yeah, I started practicing yoga and meditation to not call my boss an MFB. It's like, oh, it wasn't like, yes, I was desirous of enlightenment. Like I was desirous of not getting fired. And the funny thing is I got fired anyway. I got fired via text message. And so that's like the code into the story, right? So I go to yoga and meditation class to not like curse out my boss, all these other things. And they continue to be ugly to me for 10 months. And then when they fired me via text message, that's when the enlightenment came. Like, so I go to these things for survival. And then they fired me via text message, and in the most bureaucratic ineptitude that I've had in my lived experience, which is saying a lot, like they were like, we'd love to have an exit interview with you to discuss your experience. And this calm washed over me, and I put 2 hands in front of this just kind of happened. And I was just like, so y'all know good and hell well, we don't need no exit interview. I was like, but I'd like to thank you. And they're like, for what? I was like, I want to thank you for how poorly you treated me, because you gave me tremendous wisdom that has transformed my life. So that happened over 10 months of like radical survival. Like if I don't do something, like I'm gonna like I was gonna become the Tasmanian devil, right? Like, so that has evolved into a teaching tool. But the rendering of that story, because whether or not people take meditation class or yoga or like practice period with me, everyone's had a boss that they want to curse out. Right. And if you haven't, blessings upon you. And please tell me when you're teaching, because I need to learn from you. Right. But everyone's been in a sticky job situation, right? Everyone's been in these things. And so when I tell this story, like I said, people may not ever like encounter me again, but I give them a different approach to dealing with racism or horrible bosses. Or, I mean, the nonprofit industrial complex has some of the most well-meaning people with managerial ineptitude ever, right? So giving compassion for someone who ain't got no business being a manager, but ended up in a job, right? And so like that has happened over time. But again, like from an eldership perspective, telling the whole story makes what I've done more approachable and less it's not, yes, it's special, but sometimes in our culture, which fetishizes celebrity, it seems unattainable. And so what I love most about the concept of eldership is that like all the wild stuff that I've done and I do through me telling my stories, like you may not be called to do the wild stuff I'm doing, but you can do your wild thing. And you can have the courage to do your wild thing by hearing about mine. You know what I mean? And so rather than me, because the last thing I'll say before we transition is that if we as people who have done things non-traditionally like make it seem unattainable, then the world doesn't change. Right? So it's not that I'm debasing the specialness of my experience. I'm just telling you, like, hey, this is what worked out for me. Maybe you should consider this. Or, like I said, you may never take yoga or meditation, but like when you're in a horrible situation with your boss, right? Maybe you can be like, oh, I remember that story, that dude, Reggie, like, so if I tell the story and then you're visited upon, like a situation is visited upon you, the story's in your head, so you can choose wise action as opposed to getting caught hostage in your emotions, right? And so like eldership to me is the sharing of story to making the experience seem approachable so that people can take a easier path in basically living their best life. And thank you for the head nods and laughter. Yes, all that stuff is true. Totally got fired via text message. Totally am grateful for the miracle of the sacred pause because y'all, the words were right here.
Wow, thank you so much. And thank you for providing the phrase doing the wild thing, because I was going to phrase the question for the breakout session in a much more prosaic, boring kind of way. But, more like, how do you like seek change or step into the unknown? Do you tend to be kind of like Reggie and I, like intuitive, spontaneous, or do you are you more like John, methodical, planning? Uh, have you served as a role model, maybe to your surprise, by not having a role model yourself and just going on and doing it, but fit the wild thing in there somehow, because it's such a great phrase. Okay, so is that clear? We can put something in the chat as well if you like, but we're gonna go into breakout sessions for about 20 minutes where you can just have a conversation, please, on your experience, because that's how we learn the most, and enjoy it the most. So, okay.
And Sharon, the last thing I'll offer,
Yeah.
and for those who for whom this seems very terrifying, the world right now needs your wildness, right? Like the playbook, there's no playbook for what we're going through. All the elders that I talk to, I'm like, have y'all seen anything like this? They're like, no. Right. So there is no linear path out of the mess that we find ourselves in. And that's kind of a beautiful thing because it allows us to tap into the beauty of community. It allows us to tap into like the inner wisdom that we talk about often, and be comfortable with the mess that we're in because from the muck rises the lotus. That's all I got. Hopeful that you had great conversations. And as is my bent, I want to hear what y'all talked about, right? So like if there's anyone that would care to offer what you talked about for the rest of our benefit so we can harvest your wisdom, please unmute. And if you don't volunteer, I used to teach high school, so I'll just pick someone at random from a loving heart. So please volunteer, or I will transform back to my high school teacher self and ask you to share.
I'll volunteer.
Right on. Thank you,
Okay.
Alana.
Thank you. We had an amazing conversation actually, and I think we can highlight the things of the things we talked about. First, we talked about like how when facing the unknown, most of us were planners. We like to have like everything organized and structured, but at the end of the day, nothing ever goes out as planned. So you have to be flexible, you know, and we agree that we have to build this flexibility into facing the unknown. And the second thing we highlighted was, and Nanda said it very well, like when you're facing the unknown, you have to listen to yourself and tap into your inner wisdom, because at the end of the day, you kind of always know where to go or how to go. You just have to listen to yourself. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else care to offer? The one thing I'll add to that too is like it's the beautiful thing about eldership and sharing stories is that your inner wisdom is like peaked when someone shares their story. You know, like the you that is connected to all of us, which is the real you, when you hear someone's story, you're like, right, as opposed to when someone's like speaking from ego and you go like this, you're just kind of like, all right, whatever, man. Like, yeah, that's so boring, right? So like when we tell our stories for the benefit of others, it allows and encourages like you to listen to the you that's always cheering you on, but society tells you to ignore them. So thank you for that. Anyone else care to offer anything into the space?
We talked a little about having community
Yeah.
to bounce things off of, and also, you know, after this, now that the pandemic's over, it's time to, well, it's not like really over, but it's time anyways to start having adventures and yeah, and just jump off a little bit.
I appreciate that, Miriam. The other thing I would say to that is that we didn't go through what we just went through globally to keep doing what we were doing, right? The pandemic stopped Earth. Message, anyone? Right? Like, so message, right? So from that point, and you know, it laid bare some of the delusion that we've been holding in our society. So like, if we see things ain't working, then that means we need to push new stuff forward. And Miriam, to the context of your comment about community, eldership is sharing from your lived experience for the benefit of others in community, right? So Sharon and I talking about our stuff to y'all in the benefit of community. I mean, because I in the context of my story, I don't want anyone to be in a psychologically abusive job situation. The other part of it is that I couldn't quit because I was $5,000 in the hole, right? So I was $5,000, moved across the country and had to suck it up, right? And so I was like, oh, right. So I don't want anyone to be in that type of situation and feel like they have no options and or not model a way to find liberation through that horrific situation. So I share that story as often as possible, especially in kindred community, so you can have some freedom that, well, one, you can laugh at it because it's a funny story. It sucks that it happened to me, but it's a funny story. But like, you can have an example of a way to manage a horrific situation, and even share it with somebody, because people are like, I told my mom this, or I told so-and-so this. So when we share our stories, either orally or in book form, it creates condition for wisdom to be transmitted, which to me is the height of eldership. Any other comments from your discussion?
I would just share that we talked about how do you get comfortable enough with the unknown to move in it, and the idea of safety and security came up, and it occurred to me that what makes me feel safe is when I know what's really in my gut. If I know that I'm acting from the gut as opposed to just here or just my heart, that gut makes me feel safe in moving forward because I know I'm doing what I'm here to do.
Yeah, for sure. And that, for me, it's all three, right? So like head, heart, and instinct have got to be aligned. And then when they're aligned, look out world, right? Like, you can't tell me nothing. Right? When I've got like wisdom, courage, and fire, it's happening. Right? It's happening, and either you're welcome to come along for the ride or get out of the street. Right? One more comment, maybe? Going once, twice. So, well, deep gratitude for your shares, deep gratitude for your attention. Hopeful that this experience has been of benefit to you, not just for your head, but your heart and spirit as well. Because the last thing I'll share before leading us in a practice and passing it off to Isaac is that when we share our stories in community, we all benefit. And when we all benefit from the sharing of stories, the world changes, right? So like, again, we didn't go through what we just went through to like litigate like disputes of the past. It's like to create conditions for future flourishing. So I'm hopeful that this, whatever it is for you, I'm hopeful that this conversation about how to lean into the wild gave you not only courage, but a little bit, good nerves is what I would call it. Good nerves, right? Because all creative impetus comes from that, oh, what am I doing? What am I doing? I don't know, I'm doing it anyway, right? So like that, trust me, and Sharon and I are proof positive about it. So thank you all again. And as we wind down our group time together, I encourage you to take a posture in the body that is supported and comfortable, maybe getting into the neck a bit, shrugging the shoulders, or maybe even offering a light shake. Just to allow anything that's static to be removed. To acquaint yourself with your body, so to not be overly in the head, but to get into the body a bit, have a bit more of an embodied experience. Then picking up off of Sharon's cues earlier, rest your awareness and attention at the heart. And as you rest your attention at the heart, notice perhaps how the heart has softened over the course of our conversation. To dare to be yourself in the world is an act of tremendous courage. Courage doesn't come from a shielding of the heart. It comes from an unleashing of vulnerability. So rest your awareness on our collective vulnerability from sharing stories in a supported environment. Allow the breath to be easy. Allowing the body to breathe as opposed to you controlling it. Then in keeping with the last share, rest your awareness wherever you feel instinct. Maybe that's the gut. Maybe that's a sixth sense. But from this grounded, peaceful place, from this vulnerable place that we just left the heart, is there an instinct that is readily available for you to see and take action on? It could be anything from the 28-year plan that Sharon talked about from Elder Zen to something that you just need to do right now. But is there a flicker where you feel instinct of an action that you should take, not just for your benefit, but for all of our benefit? Because when you take care of you, we all benefit. And lastly, resting your awareness and attention with the feet on the ground, supported by the earth, knowing that what you feel in the heart and what you feel in your instinct is supported. When you're ready, if eyes are closed, gently open. If they're lower, gently raise them and release the meditation. Isaac, you're up.
Well, thank you so much, Reggie. Just so nice to ground us here all the time. So very quickly, just a few announcements, and then I will post them also here in the chat. So the next Sitting at the Feet of Elders with Chris Underhill will be happening in May 2nd. So hopefully we'll see you there. And then we will return with the next Bringing It Home also next month with episode 4 to debrief a little bit about that amazing webinar, and also sending here the book club information at our website. And I believe, Missy, you have the book there, so maybe you can.
Yeah, we'll be spending more time with Sharon, where we'll dive into real life. We are setting a date soon. It will be sometime in June, so you have plenty of time to read the book. But feel free to go, and on the book club sign up, we'll make sure that that list gets notified as to when the book. We're going to have the post reading of the book, in-depth conversation with Sharon, so we'll get more of that love from her and her knowledge. And with that, thank you all so much. We look forward to spending time again with you next week.
Take good care. Love and peace.